And we're live. Hey, everyone.
Hello. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the stream.
Yes, this one is going to be a fun one. I uh, I noticed when if you haven't noticed, if you follow the our Mesh Week videos or streams from a couple of weeks back, you've noticed that I've changed the intro video. But what I forgot is that there's no music, so it's kind of dull. But anyway, uh, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining. What are we gonna do today, Marino?
So we're actually going to we're going to see me feel the pain of trying to get through a number of scenarios as if I was taking the exam. But in this particular episode, what we're going to try and focus on is more the thought process. So I won't have a live terminal or anything like that. It's just more so how I would go about using the documentation and just speeding up my overall process, and also strategizing, like looking at the questions, seeing if I can use the same answer or parts of an answer in another question as well. And so if you can pick up on those quickly enough, it helps you save time on the exam, but at the same time, just be much more efficient. So we're going to go through that exercise, and probably in a follow-up stream after KubeCon is done, because KubeCon is coming up real soon, literally in just under 2 weeks.
Yep.
And by the way, if you're going, let us know. Just throw it in the chat. Tell us when you're going to be there, and we'd love to hang out. But after KubeCon's over, we're definitely going to get into a terminal style scenario setup where I'm going to dig into it, or one of us will dig into it and see how it all works.
What do you mean, one of us? I think you're it.
I am it. Okay, all right.
You volunteered for one thing, and now you're by default you're gonna be it for like the next year or something.
Here we go. All right.
Yeah, but no, I just to like everything you said, and also just a caveat that this is a mock exam that I created, that we created. This isn't coming from like CNCF, or this isn't anything official. So I want to make that clear, right? These are not. This is something that I think that could be on the exam, perhaps, right? And the way that I put this together is I basically went through the curriculum, through the streams that we did, and everything that's in this mock exam is what we talked about back then. So it's no tricky questions. I hope I tried to stay away from the tricky questions, but anyway, yeah. Say hi if you haven't yet in the comments, and I think we're ready to go, right? All right, so I have a video for this one, so let's do this one. All right. Oh yeah, this one was much better, right, than the intro.
I feel like you need some popcorn just hanging off to the side as you watch me. To check myself in this torture.
It's funny that we're going from that grandiose music and everything, and now I'm just gonna turn on this sticker and tell you go to that Bitly link to look at the exam. It's kind of underwhelming, but so yeah, that's the link. I'll post it in the comments as well if for people to follow along. But it's just a Google form. You don't have to submit. It shouldn't ask you for any. Don't have to sign in. I don't think you should have to sign in. I made it like public and everything. You can submit if you want. I think you can submit answers if you want, but it's not going to be. We're not going to know who you are, and yeah, but you can try submitting just for fun if you want to, and if you want us to. Rate your exam, add your email or your name somewhere so we know who you are. But anyway, Marino, this is where the exam is. I think you should probably start sharing your screen, open the exam, look at the questions, and go through it. And we'll if you need help, let us know. We'll try to help out a little bit. And anyone who's watching and listening in, you can help Marino if you want, but we'll decide if you want to share the answers with him. Uh, so yeah, let's do this.
Let's go. Let's go.
Oh.
All right.
Let's see. This one might be better. Yeah.
All right. I want to log in with my account, and oh my gosh, we already dug. It just like jumps right into
It's
it.
in. Yeah. There's no introduction. There's no welcome. It's just
like right into it. Okay. Let's just. Ooh, this.
yeah.
Right.
That's Google. That's not me. I
That's
tried to
okay.
fix it, and I don't know why it's overflowing. But
Okay. So, how I tend to break down exams is I first try to go through a quick pass of all the questions. Let's assume I have about 75 minutes on the clock starting now, just because I hit next. I shouldn't have hit that. I should have said something beforehand. But assume that you'll read through a bunch of policies before you actually begin. And the timer starts when that first question normally comes up. So maybe Peter's got a timer somewhere that I can't see, and I'm just looking visually at the clock. It's 1:07 p.m. Let's assume that I started at 1:06, so I'm wasting time talking about random things. No, they're all relevant, but the idea is to make sure we cover all questions first so that we don't miss anything, because when we go through that second pass, we tend to pick up things that we missed the first time around. So let's go through this question. Create an Istio operator resource that you can use to deploy Istio with the following configuration. 2 ingress gateways, one called payments ingress deployed to the payments namespace, and then another one called front-end ingress deployed to the front-end namespace. And then there's a single egress gateway where there's a cluster egress name here, and then it's deployed to the egress namespace. And then Pilot, that component inside of Istio needs to have a CPU request of 75M, which I think is micro or something CPU cycles, and then 4096. I've never really understood the difference between MI and ME. I think it's like megabits or something, or millibits or something
so
like that.
it's megabytes.
Yeah, that is something very like not standard. Anyways, so I just have to make sure I conform to this, right? All right. So what that means is we have to create a YAML that's going to have an Istio operator configuration. Before I go jump in, oh, there we go, megabytes. I love it. Before I jump into creating this, let's look into the other questions and see what else they're asking. And I like that we can go back and forth. Oh,
yeah. There's more questions here, but
okay.
Yeah, there's 3.
Okay. All right. So it's broken down.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one is about traffic management, and it's actually, if you notice, the previous one really was around Istio installation, upgrade, and configuration. So you'd have to sit there and think about all the different ways you can install Istio. And you notice that the operator is an approach to install Istio. So we could go pull up the documentation and look at that afterwards. All right, so traffic management, we're given access to a Kubernetes cluster with Istio installed. We have 2 workloads running in the default namespace. One's called payments and one's called front end. They both have Kubernetes services for them. We want to expose both services through the ingress gateway in the following way. Payments should be accessible from mycompany.com/payments, and front end should be accessible on mycompany.com. All right, so we have to create a gateway and a virtual service resource to expose the services. And then we have another question here. 2 versions of a workload are running inside the cluster, orders v1 and v2. There's a label called app orders as the selector. Both deployments use the version label either set to v1 or v2. You've been asked to configure a 30-70 traffic split where 30% of the traffic goes to v1 and 70% goes to v2. That seems pretty easy enough. Okay, that should be a piece of cake, unless there's some. I'll go back and look at it afterwards. So the next one, we have to create a virtual service that injects delays and faults for the backend for these cases. A 5-second delay whenever a request is made to the backend.default.svc cluster.local/delay, and a 403 response whenever a request is made to the backend/fault. Okay. All right, let's see what else is here. Securing workloads. You want to configure strict mTLS policy for all workloads in the default namespace with the label mTLS strict set. Additionally, you want to disable mTLS for port 9000. Ooh, interesting. this is where it gets kind of interesting. So that's that one extra thing that we're have to sit and think about. There's probably a close enough example that we can mess around with as long as we meet those conditions. All right. And then we have to write an authorization policy that applies to workloads with the label app customers in the default namespace. And then this policy allows access from either a principal called cluster.local/ns/default/SA payments, or the one that has orders. So what this is telling us is anything with the service account payments or anything with the service account orders should be able to access the API path with a get operation, the read-only operation. So all other operations should be denied by default. Write an authorization policy that denies access between all workloads in the namespace called payments. That's an interesting one. So this could be a default denial policy that just is targeted to the the payments namespace. Okay, let's keep on moving. What?
I think that was it.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah, we went through everything.
Okay.
No, that's fine. You can go through it again.
All right. I thought there was more, but that's completely fine. Okay, let's get
if you want more, we can do more. But I think I thought this was plenty enough.
Yeah, this is more than enough. All right, let's start with the first one. So it's asking us to install or create an Istio operator resource. So obviously, you're never going to have to remember all of this by hand. I mean, you can have a mechanism that Istio-CTL can provide you a sample output that you can use and apply it. Or we can come straight to the docs, because you will have access to one tab on the exam, more than likely, just like the other exams that you see, like the CKA as well as the CCAD and as well as the CKS. The CKS, though, I think allows you documentation to other resources outside of the Kubernetes docs as well, but it's specific resources that you would use, like access to, I think, Sysdig, Falco, or something like that. All right, so we're gonna go over to my little unorganized set of resources. So I've got an Istio operator install saved up here, and we could scroll down to. Actually, this is a good start, but it doesn't give us everything. We have an egress gateway, and we have just our CPU and memory configuration. Let's go back or just our memory configuration. So it wants us to create a few resources, right? So we have to have 2 ingress gateways and 1 egress gateway. And we also have to add a CPU request. We can just modify the memory request that's already there. So that's kind of halfway there. I mean, there could be other documentation as well that I could go reference, but let's have this as a placeholder for now. That way we could, if we need to, we can scour the documentation. So let's just call this question 1, and then in here we're going to drop it and paste in everything. So I'll remove everything here, and then I'll remove this as well, and we'll call this Istio. I'm not in Markdown. YAML. Not in Markdown. I should have dropped this into the Markdown file, but that's okay. We'll stay here. Okay. So let's go back here and see if there's another more specific documentation on the operator resource. Yes, could be ready. Oh, I can't do that. It's the operator API. Ooh, okay, here we go. This is exactly what we want. So that's a sample config right there. Let's look for the ingress gateways. Okay, so we just have to add these 2 fields. We had to add this once, and then we just add our few gateways. In fact, there might be some examples somewhere hidden, but I don't know if I want to spend the time go searching for that right now. Yeah, so we have to treat it like an array, and we just basically have to add in the multiple entries that we need to. So I would go back here and then maybe right above this, hit enter, and I would call this ingress gateways. For some reason, I feel like it's aligned. Okay, it's aligned. I think it's just because oh yeah, never mind. Okay, and then we'll give the first one a name. We'll go back to our mock exam. And the first one is payments ingress. So notice here in the question, it doesn't even tell us what to call the actual resource. It's an Istio operator. It didn't tell us what to call it, so we could call it anything. But this is important detail, because if it says you have to call it something specific, don't miss that detail. You actually have to add that. So right now I'm modifying the example YAML that I pulled from the example back here, right? And I'm just adding in some additional features based off of the question requirements. So I'm adding in an additional ingress, or 2 ingress gateways. The first one I'm calling payments ingress, enabled true. And then the second one, I probably have to do something with the namespace as well. And then the second one is called front-end ingress. Front-end ingress, and then enabled true. Okay, so now I have to double check namespace stuff here. So under the, okay, so that's a profile, mesh config, add-on components. Okay, so there's components there. I don't want to keep digging into unnecessary rabbit holes here. But let's see if we can find anything specific to namespaces. Because I want to be able to accomplish this with a single one. I'm sure that under the oh, here we go, gateway spec. Wait, maybe that's not it. I don't know if y'all can feel my heart beating right now. It's like beating so much. I'm like literally trying to find what I need. There's probably another example that I could look at as well. Let's see. Let's go back to the documentation. Let's go back to setup. Let's go back to installation. Istio operator install. Oh yeah, because there's a profile there. Ewoks BL. Rose Marino. It's probably something like so easy that I just have to just type in namespace or something like that. And
can you like repeat what the question that you're trying to figure out?
Okay,
Exactly.
so what I'm trying to figure out is how I make sure that the ingress gateway that I create lands in the payments namespace. So I probably have to specify a namespace field, I'd imagine, and then type in payments. Maybe that should work. This technically should work. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, but I can't seem to find a suitable example that specifies the specific namespace here. But that's okay. Later on, I'll get scolded for missing something super obvious. All right, so this one, cluster egress, and then deployed to the egress namespace. Cluster. By the way, we are always able to come back and check this later on, because we may find something that answers this question for us. So
Yes. Yeah, I think the exam you can go back and forth.
Yep. All right, let's go to our memory and our CPU. Our memory is supposed to be 4096 MI, so I just got to change this to 4096, and our CPU should be 750M. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. Okay, let's park that for now, because I don't want to spend too much more time with it. I mean, if I had a terminal, I could probably test it out, but we'll see. All right, so we're given access to a cluster with Istio installed. We have two workloads that are running in the default namespace, payments and front end. Both workloads have corresponding Kubernetes services with the same name. Now, we might want to expose both services through the Ingress gateway in the following way. Payments should be accessible on the mycompany.com payments, and front end should be accessible on mycompany.com. So we got to create a gateway resource, and we have to somehow break this up so that within the virtual service, we can route to one of these two, depending on how we are arriving at, or basically providing this HTTP information. So let's go over to my Istio Ingress gateways, and let us see. Okay, so the usage of a gateway actually provides us the ability to effectively listen in for requests on a given host. Now, what we also have to realize is, if we're going to a particular destination, let's just say not the default one, then we actually have to put in a path, but we also have to know where to route that towards. So for example, in this question, front end is a service, right? And if I just go to mycompany.com, it'll automatically route me to front end. But if I also have another service that lives behind mycompany.com payments, I can't just simply use mycompany.com to get here. I have to basically append the payments right here. So what we're going to do is now create a virtual service configuration for creating two rules that route traffic for path status and delay. So I have to manipulate this in such a way that maybe I have a better example somewhere, or maybe not. I don't know. Okay, so I have to have two iterations of this somehow. Anyways, let's go back to our gateway configuration, and we need to create a gateway. It doesn't tell us what to call the gateway, so we'll just call it anything. We'll call it front end gateway. It doesn't tell us what ingress to select, so we can just leave it as the default. That's fine. The host name, though, what is it telling us? The host name is mycompany.com. So we're going to listen in for requests there. mycompany.com.
So
Is this?
Marino, in this case, it is a single gateway and then two virtual services referring the same gateway, because the gateway is bound to the host name. The host name is the same, and the virtual service will select a different path, right?
Right. So in my virtual service, I can specify the two different routes, right? One that goes directly to front end, and another one that goes to payments. It's just based off of the additional prefix that I apply.
I think you only need to select if we are still following. I mean, if this question comes after the first one, the payment gateway.
Maybe
payments, right?
Peter can clarify this. Are the questions interrelated actually in any way?
No.
Okay.
All
right.
No.
Okay. So that's good.
Like the installation question is not related to the next question and so on. And I think I don't think they'll do that in the exam either, because that would mean that you would have to, like, if you get the first question wrong, then you get everything wrong afterwards.
CK are like this. Questions are not. I would say the questions are independent, but in the end, because the selector of the Ingress gateway is set to Ingress gateway, which is the default name, of course.
Yeah. That wasn't me.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have clarified, but I would assume if it's not, just stick with the defaults, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know that the default Ingress gateway is Istio Ingress gateway, right? Has that label set. So yeah. But also, I mean, in the real exam, you'll have access to the cluster, right? So you could always look it up as well, just to be 100% sure. But
yeah, and that's the other key important detail for what we're doing right now. The challenge is I have no ability to test this out. I mean, maybe I could pull up a kind cluster and test it out, but I think it's just more so the thought process first, and then next time around we'll run through actually testing this out, because on the exam, if something breaks or something just doesn't work, the terminal is going to spit out an error message that you'll be able to easily identify and go back and troubleshoot, right? Here, I'm just literally going in blind. So what I don't know is if something I'm doing is incorrect, but we'll find out at the end of this.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So what did I do? Okay. So it's not specifying anything about protocol, no TLS. So we're going to keep everything standard, answering on HTTP port 80. So that should be good. What I'll do is I'll probably just remove this because I don't need this, and I'll remove this as well. Okay, so we have one Ingress gateway. Now we have to mess around with the virtual service here so that we can get to the right destination. So the host that we're trying to read into is mycompany.com. The gateway that we're going to use is front-end gateway. So let me just modify that. Oh, dang it. That's not what I meant to do. I'll just change it right here. Okay. Now, here's the interesting part. If we go back here, does it say anything about a port? Does not. So no ports.
No ports, assume it's 80.
Yeah, that's what I imagine.
Is it default? If you don't specify a port, then you
actually, right? I think it because you're gonna name the service there, right? So it's whatever the port on the service is that is gonna be picked up, I think.
Yeah, there is a strange convention, right? So the port has to be called HTTP or HTTPS, and then there was a convention on the port name. But yeah, in this case, I mean, of course, the question doesn't specify. So I mean,
yeah, but I think Marino was talking at like line 64 specifically, right? I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think if you don't specify the port, it's whatever the port on the service is, right? So if the service exposes a single port, that's the one that's going to be picked up, right? So you could theoretically don't even have to specify the port and the number there, right? Yeah. Port is optional. I don't know what the what happens if service exposes multiple ports? Which one is picked at that point? Might be a good test for someone. But it might just at random pick maybe the first one, or probably the first one or something. But yeah.
So a lot of the comments are saying port is optional, port is not needed. So I mean, the nice thing is if I ran this through the exam or ran this through the terminal, it would probably accept the configuration anyways and default to it, and if I left it out. So if a service exposes only a single port, it is not required to explicitly select the port.
Yeah. So if this was posed like this in the actual exam, I would probably remove port and the number as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the question outside of the exam is, well, what if service exposes multiple ports? Which one gets selected, right? Is it the first one, or is it non-deterministic? I'm not sure. I don't have an answer.
So I messed around with the configuration, but I actually want to go back and look at the Istio Gateway resource and look at a few examples because I want to make sure that I've got it correct. Actually, was it a gateway resource that I was creating? No, a virtual service resource. So here's what I'll do. Let's go into traffic management. Let's look at the virtual services example. Okay. So I missed something. I missed the dash here. So let me, there we go. I think that's all aligned. Okay, so let me explain why I did what I did here. So I created an ingress gateway resource and I called it front-end gateway, but I didn't specify anything. I used the host name mycompany.com based off of what the exam suggested or the question. And then I created I just specified or left the ports default because it didn't say anything about what protocols we're using HTTP. Make sure we specify the protocol, give it a name, and actually specify the number we're using. And now I'm taking a virtual service resource. I pulled an example directly from the Ingress Gateway configuration that I saw previously. So back here. So it's this one right here. So this virtual service. And what I'm attempting to do is when I receive a request, if I've received a request on mycompany.com/payments, we'll route it to the payment service, which is exactly what it's asking me to do. They're both in the default namespace, so I don't have to specify any particular namespace destination. But if I don't specify a URI prefix, right? If I don't have anything that matches here and I'm just straight up going to mycompany.com, the next option, the default option would be to route it to front end. So at this point, the traffic will go to front end if I don't specify any sort of path here, like it's asking in the exam. So that should be taking care of that gateway and virtual service. All right, next what we need to do is we need to create a virtual service and destination rule that does some traffic splitting. So we can accomplish this by going to the documentation again and just going into a traffic shifting lab here. And there's a task here that basically provides you a virtual service configuration as well as a destination rule configuration. Actually, the destination rule configuration is elsewhere. It is, actually, if you go to the book info, the destination rule configuration would live here for this example. But let's take a different approach. We have examples if we need to. I'm sure if we go into the documentation and if we go into traffic management, we can see a virtual service example, and then there should be a destination rule example with the subsets somewhere close by. Here we go. Okay. So let's copy both, and then we can start aligning stuff. So let me scroll down and let's do 2B because this is 2A. Let's paste that virtual service config. Let's now take the DR configuration and let's go back to our example, paste it in. Let's go back to the specifics that it wants us to follow. So it says there are two versions of a workload running inside the cluster, orders v1 and orders v2. A Kubernetes service resource is also uses app orders on its label selector. Both deployments use the version label either set to v1 or v2. So the traffic split is 30/70, and we also have to make sure we align our subsets here. So let's go into this for a second. The Kubernetes service name is orders. Okay. Let's just call this orders, and let's just assume that, I wonder if we need a spec for that. I mean, a host for this. I'll come back and check in a second. You know, I'm going to go search for a virtual service config with a multiple versions. Maybe this one. Hey, wait, what? Why didn't I thought I grabbed that one. Oh, I guess I didn't. All right, this is probably a more appropriate one. So if I come here and if I drop this in, now I've got the breakdown of the subsets. Okay, so now we've got something to work with that makes a little bit more sense. I don't need this one because I only have two versions. There's also, if I go into the mock exam, does it say anything about Vanessa configured 30/70 traffic split? Okay. Also, you know what? I think it's also good to go look at that task again because there probably is a good example of the traffic shifting. So let's go there for a second. Okay, there's the weights that I need. Actually, this is even a better example because now I can lock this down to the specific numbers that I need. I don't have to dance around any additional detail. Dang it, that's not what I meant to copy. I meant to copy this. Okay, I feel like I'm missing something now. Okay, I should not have done that, but maybe I can just copy all this, go back there just to make sure I'm complete. I don't know why there's oh, it's probably just because the name's not there. There we go. That looks a lot healthier. Okay, so we have a more complete V1 and V2. I don't think we need a traffic policy right now, so I'll remove that. I don't believe we need this either, so we can remove that. If we go to the weights, we need 30/70, so we'll say this is going to be 30 and then the other is going to be 70. V1 or V2. Okay, so V1, V2 labels. Host my service. All right, let's call this orders. Call this orders as well. Orders DR. Call this I think orders as well. I think this all should be orders. I don't even know what the domain name would be, but I feel like in the spec, I should be able to specify a label somewhere. So let's go see if there's a way or a mechanism to focus on the labels. So let's see, under all this documentation that I added, I do not have exactly what I need.
What are you looking for?
Oh
exactly?
no, I'm going to go to the virtual service stuff. I'm just trying to see the virtual services configurational parameters, or like fields that I can configure. The host fields, routing rules, destination.
So that's typically if I think if you could make your window a bit larger, there's going to be a table. Oh, not like this. I resize widthwise. There's a on the left side. Go higher. I think there you go. So on the left side from the table of contents, there should be not examples, but reference something it's at the bottom. References configuration.
Oh yeah, they're right.
So
Okay.
this will actually show, and then traffic management, right? This will actually show you all the fields that you
That's
can
what I
set,
need.
right? And then on the right side, you have the
Yeah.
types, I guess, right?
Better check spec than tasks. I love that. Yep.
I mean, tasks are good because they give you like a starting point, but then similar things you can find in the references as well, right?
Exactly.
And, similar examples, I guess, or full examples.
So the one thing that's tripping me up is app orders, but I don't know how that's overly relevant, because this is only relevant to the service itself and the workloads that have that selector. Because as long as the workloads themselves have these labels on them, then I will, hold on, let's go back here. Labels, virtual service.
So what is tripping you up? It's the label thing, or
Yeah, this right here. I don't and I'm not thinking it's like Ewoks is saying at Marino, what if other workloads with app front end have V1 and V2? Oh, okay. So I also have to somehow add another label as well under the okay. That probably is it too. App orders. So I guess, do I have to set that up as an array? Like where I have multiple entries, or I don't know. Maybe that should do it. I think that should do it. Okay, so I think I've got my virtual services. It's split up going 30/70. I've got my versions and subsets defined. V1, V2, V1, V2 on the labels, app orders. Let's see. Let's go back to this reference. Destination rule. Let's see if there's anything specific about subset. Oh, okay. So I can have multiple. One or more. wish you would just give me an example where you show me two.
I
Okay.
think it's, yeah, if you, I mean, realistically, if you had access to a Kubernetes cluster, you could
I
just
could
take
test.
this,
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
deploy it. It would
Yeah.
give you for sure an error if you messed it up, right?
Yeah, if I messed it up. Okay, so all right, I will park this because I think that is the most appropriate answer for that. And let's go to 2C and see what it's asking. So it wants us to create a virtual service that injects delays and faults for the backend service for these cases. A 5-second delay whenever a request is made to backend.default.svc.cluster.local/delay. And then an HTTP 403 response whenever a request is made to the backend.default. Okay. So we're going to have to go into our virtual services configuration, and we need an example to start with. So EWOX, I completely agree. The spec has all this information and a lot of good details that help us maybe like pinpoint and add those specific, I guess, fields into our config. But I think it's also a good approach to start with an example that you can work off of, so you're not having to sit there and figure out where to find the best example or find the best starting point. So in our case, we want to find a fault injection one. So we're going to inject some faults. Let's go back actually now and read the question properly. Delays and faults, a 5-second delay. So we have a 5-second delay going on the match of a destination. Okay, so we can use this as a starting point as well, even though I may not use all of what's in there. I don't want to open this as a new tab. Copy link address. We'll go here. Go back now, go to my tab here, paste that in. Okay, start with that. And we'll go back to the question and check for a few things that we need to be aware of. So we need these two details. I'm going to go back here. I'm just going to add this at the bottom so I have them for reference. Okay, have that. 5-second delay whenever a request is made to that. Okay. And then a 403 response. So I need to do an abort fault. Will that work? No, that's not it. Oh, actually, maybe that could work. That could work. Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm not even halfway through the exam and I'm like literally like, oh my God. All right. So what we can do is we can use this little portion here because we are, per the question, we want to return some response whenever a request is made here. And I don't know if fault is leading me to use this one particular fault that we can do with an abort, but maybe this works. Maybe this is a way to use this. So let me add that bit in. We can adjust the fields as necessary. Okay. And I have to add the URI as well. So that means I need a prefix. So I have a prefix up here. So I can use this match statement. We can start doing some piecing together so that we have a few things to work with. So prefix, route, payments. We're not using payments. We're going to the backend service. So we take this right here. Right, and then URI, we'll type in delay. And we're going to use this exact same thing again because we need it for our fault. Okay, so we have that ready to go, and I just need to align. Okay, the fault comes first. So basically, I need to take all of this and move it underneath here. And I have to start indenting stuff here. So, okay. So now I'm at the point where I have all the necessary pieces I think that I need for my virtual service configuration. The thing that I need to do is, because I have the delay, I have my destinations of where I'm going to. I have the fault that I want to throw in there. What I need to modify, though, is I need to actually just align this all correctly so it reads as a proper YAML. So I have a bunch of things that I don't need. So I can remove this. And I can move this up. Actually, is that right? Is that indentation right? I feel like my indentation is going to be off somehow, but we'll fix it. The fault should be 7 seconds. Okay, I feel like all of this needs to go. Move up 1. Does that seem right? I don't know. I feel like it's right. Okay, that looks to be right for the, I don't need this stuff. It looks to be right for the first part. And then the second part, I need to, why do I have this twice? Oops. Okay, let me remove this. That's URI delay. I feel like I can't have 2 of these, but maybe this is close enough. I would never dare fix YAML indentation at the end. Yeah, I know. Right. Okay. So yeah, it's because I don't have any sort of proper linters right now to see where my indentation might be off. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna assume that for the sake of my this exam, right, or this mock exam, that my indentation is mostly right, and this should be satisfactory for that particular question. So I think that answers my 2C. Let's move on.
Yeah. Well, one thing here with YAML, and you can always use JSON as well, right?
Yes, that's true
And
too.
that one, like JSON, is sometimes so much easier to read in terms of arrays and maps than YAML is.
Exactly. So assuming we have time, we should be able to come back and review some of these questions and the justification behind this. All right. So we want to configure a strict mTLS policy for all workloads in the default namespace with the label mTLS strict. Additionally, you want to disable mTLS. Important question. How many routings and faults should you have under HTTP? That's a good question. Come back and check that. Well, it seems like you can, I don't know.
Was this the question, like a practical question, or was this the question?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious. Is this like specifically trying to navigate me in a proper direction, or are you just asking about production usage?
Yeah, I mean, production usage, forget about it, right?
yeah.
But I mean, by requirements task.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah,
We'll come back to
yeah.
that. I want to make sure I can get through all of these questions. Okay, let me come back to the security in a second. Oh shoot, I did that again. Okay, actually, this is the last question then.
Yes,
Or the last
security is secure. We still have like multiple, like 3 or 4 multiple.
Okay, all right.
questions
For some reason, I keep thinking that I have multiple other questions like that I have to configure. Okay, all right. This now I think we can get through this. All right, let's go, folks. All right, so I'm gonna work backwards because they're all independent of each other. Write an authorization policy that denies access between all workloads in the namespace called payments. This is easy enough. You know, this is one of those times where I would just do a deny all. And then the first thing that shows up is an authorization policy or an explicit deny. So there's an explicit deny, which actually doesn't give me what I'm looking for, because the deny all policy would actually, that's not what I'm trying to do. The deny all policy actually allows you to block everything easily with a couple of lines. I'm just trying to find the most simplest one, but I think this should be it, or close enough. Following is another example. Sets deny action to create sets action to deny to create a deny policy. Didn't I type in deny all in the search? I probably did. Let's try that again. Deny all policy. Oh, here we go. Security policy examples. Namespace isolation except ingress. Okay. I think literally if I just use this should be all I require. But I feel like there is a much more specific example somewhere hidden. All right, you know what? Let's also check the tasks. Security, authorization, explicit deny. I don't think I need a rules section. I could probably get by without it. So let's try and find concepts, security, authorization policies. Yeah, I'm getting close. I'm getting close.
A little bit higher.
Yeah, it was probably. I knew it was.
I passed it like 3 times.
I probably. Yeah, here we go. That's all I needed, right there. See, I'm telling you, it's like it's hidden in the documentation somewhere. Here, I'll copy the entire.
Yeah.
block.
Now the whole question here. Yes, a lot of stuff is in the documentation. Now the question is it worth searching through it, right? Or is it worth going like you were thinking? Your thought process was, I think just setting action to deny is enough, and I don't have to set the rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could have, if you wanted to double check that, you would go to references section for the resource itself, and then you would see that rules has to be said explicitly, right? If you wanted to prove that point, right? But
let's go take a look at that for a second quickly.
Yeah, you can also do the thing on the right. There's see there if you click on the rule, the
Oh yeah, right here.
the second one. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go, right. So this one might actually you have to go one level higher because this one is talking about the. There you go. Right.
Optional. A list of
Actually, it
rules.
is optional. Yeah.
Okay, so it is optional now. That could have
Yeah,
changed.
but it
Since...
does tell you, right? It does tell you
Mhm.
specifically what happens if you set it to something or if you don't set it at all, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, my suggestion would be for anyone taking the exam to always default to references because you'll get not only the examples but also the explanations, right, of all fields that you can ever set in that resource, right?
Yeah, and even better, I found an example that specifically addresses.
Yeah. You find the actual one that's.
Yeah.
Wait, why did you delete that one?
Well, this one is a little bit more specific, I think. I mean, it didn't really matter because all I just needed to do was just add in the namespace here.
Oh, yeah. But this is the one that you had before was wrong. This
one?
This one's correct.
This one?
The one that you pasted in.
Just now. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, you pasted in this one, the bottom.
Yeah, because I don't need the selector. And
you're just you're not explicitly applying it to that one, but to all
names.
Of them.
Exactly. Namespaces, payments. Okay. All right. And that's it. All right. So that's 2C. Okay, let's do 2A. I'll make a section for that, and then 2B. Let's see which one of the two is easier so I can spend more time stressing about the other. All right, write an authorization policy that does the following. The policy applies to workloads with the label app customers in the default namespace. The policy allows access either from a principal called cluster.local. Okay. I think we should be able to use that same section to find a very similar example. But before anything, there's two principles that I have to add in there. There we go. I think this is probably one that will accomplish that goal because I don't require a when. That's not me. I'm not hungry. I hear someone's stomach growling. Oh. Who's the hungry one here?
Might be me.
That's okay. All right.
Just tells you how good my microphone is.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, because I'm like, my microphone's not that good. All right, let's drop this in. I'm gonna delete a bunch of things we don't need, but let me just verify. The policy applies to workloads with the label app customers in the default namespace. So if we go back here, default namespace. We'll just call this auth Paul because it doesn't ask me to do anything. Principles, okay. So we're receiving traffic from this location. I wonder if I could do multiple namespaces here. I mean, sorry, multiple principles in this list. Can I? Is that allowed?
How would you check that? How would you check if you could have multiple like principles under the source?
Yeah, I don't think
field.
Yeah.
I mean, no. I'm asking, how would you check that? Right? You would check it here in docs, right?
Yeah. Let's see. Principles. Let's see. So maybe I could comma separate them. Maybe that's probably going to be workable. Does that specifically evaluate it an or an and? That's the other question. Type string, principles type string.
Yeah, so it's an array, right?
Yeah, so it's a list. Then where's my? So that would work then, theoretically. Okay, source namespace is default. To I don't need that when statement. Let's go back and look at that previous example that I was looking at. The dev namespace to the post, to post method. Yeah. So this is the source, and that's the action it can run from operation get. Oh, dang it. Operation is get. And then let me just double check something. API is the path. So let me throw that in there. Let me remove this. Okay, I think that's good. Write an authorization policy that applies to workloads with the label app customers in the default namespace. I need a label. Match labels. There we go. Spec. Match labels, and the label is app customers. Okay. All right. Doesn't say what name to give it. It just says to apply work to the workloads with the label app customers in the default namespace. And it allows access from either principals with the payments SA or the orders SA with the get operations to the API path, which appears to be what exactly it is doing.
So if you read the rules out loud, right, it's saying selector. So it's applying this rule, right? If it's applying whatever is specified under rules to app customers, right?
Yep.
And then the rules are saying it allows requests
from these service accounts in the default namespace, and they can perform these operations on the /API prefix.
Okay.
I feel like I'm missing something here.
You have a bit extra, but that again might be me the way that I wrote the question. I didn't explicitly say in the question that the calls have to come from the default namespace.
Oh, okay.
Right. I said it has to be specifically applied to the workloads running with that label in the default namespace. So that's line 150, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I gave an answer away. But...
okay. So I had most of it there, just some extra stuff that probably didn't need. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Which I mean, the thing that I wanted to bring up is it's very important to read, especially with these like with authorization policies, if there are any questions, is very. I probably didn't do the best job in writing the question either, but read it exactly, right? Does it say apply the policy to the workloads, right? To these specific workloads, or is it saying apply the policy to the workloads and then make sure that the rules contain a namespace, right, from where the workloads can be called, right? So it can be a little bit
Tricky.
can be tricky, right? But I'm sure the questions are posed much better in the actual exam.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Last question I've got to do. You want to configure a strict mTLS policy for all workloads in the default namespace with a label mTLS strict set. Additionally, you want to disable mTLS for port 9000 on the same set of workloads. Create a resource that configures these settings. Yikes, create a resource. It's so generic. It's like, okay.
I didn't, yeah, I didn't, I specifically didn't want to call out which resource, right? So it would be for the test taker or exam taker to figure out what is the resource that allows you to set the, I guess, mutual TLS. Yeah, there we go. It didn't take you long, so.
Yeah, there's parts though that I have to still figure. Here we go. I think I figured out what I need. Okay, there we go. That was easy enough, I think, or not really easy. I'm not done yet, but okay. So I need a peer authentication policy, which basically allows me to set the mTLS policy to be strict. And I need to make sure I target the default namespace with workloads that have this label in it. So if I go back here and if I type in this, I have to say mTLS and then here strict. Okay. And then port level mTLS 9, I think it was 9,000 or 8,000. I'll double check right now. It is 9,000 disable for the same set of workloads. I think that's it. The namespace. Default. mTLS. Could you do me a favor, Peter? Could you just speak into the mic for a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can hear
I started getting a ringing in my ear, so I wasn't sure if so I wasn't sure if I lost my
if it was you or if I ate a clock or something.
I'm not sure. All right, let's double check and see. Okay. I think that meets the requirement for that question. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna spend 5 more minutes or 6 more minutes just to review all my answers, just to make sure that they seem appropriate and they capture all what I needed it to capture. So the first question was asking, create an Istio operator resource you can use to deploy Istio with the following configuration: 2 ingress gateways, payment ingress, and front-end ingress, for their respective namespaces, payments, and front-end namespace. And then there's a single egress gateway that we deploy to the egress namespace. It's called cluster egress. And then we have to update the pilot component to have a CPU request of 750 M and 4096 megabytes. All right. Does that align with what I have here? Egress gateway, ingress gateways. I've got 2. And then I've got my requests for my CPU and my memory. And it doesn't tell me what to call it. So I'm just going to leave it that default. Okay. That looks to be good to me. I might have lost something there, but that's okay. All right, you're given access to a cluster with Istio installed. 2 workloads are running in the default namespace, payments, and front end. Both workloads have corresponding Kubernetes services with the same name. We want to create a gateway and a virtual service that aligns to this. So if I go back to my resource here, I've got a gateway resource that's listening in for this host on a default set of ports and protocols that we expect to use because this wasn't specified. And now we have a virtual service that aligns with that configuration. Caveat, indentation might be misaligned, but the idea is if we are receiving a request on mycompany.com on the front-end gateway, and we are going to this prefix payments, then we'll route to the payment service. Otherwise, we'll route to the front end service because we don't have a prefix added. All right, so that should be satisfactory for that question. For the second question, we need to, oh, I probably should paste in my answers as I go. Seems like a bad idea to not do that.
Oh, or just make sure you have it like save this file somewhere, right? I'm
Yeah.
not gonna know if it's from you or if it's from someone else, but
That's true. Yeah, okay.
because I didn't set that. Just make sure you have it stored in that file, and we can check it out later.
Yeah, all right. Important that prefix route is before the default route, which I believe I have, right? I think my prefix route, which is right here, is before my default route. Because and you're right, we want to catch that first, right? It's kind of like the default routing rule or the default deny all rule. If you have that as the first entry in your firewall table, it's going to deny all traffic before it accepts anything. So it's an order of operations. All right, 2B is asking me to create two versions of a workload that are running inside the cluster, orders V1 and V2, which we know about. We are aware they have version labels set V1 and V2. We want to make sure that 30% of the traffic goes to V1 and 70% goes to V2, and we need both a VS and a DR to complete this task. So I have a VS here that routes accordingly set to the weight. So the subset V1 will route to we'll route to V1 of orders and send 30% of the traffic there. And then for V2 of the orders, we'll route 70% of the traffic. Now,
And this applies to which host?
It actually doesn't say what host to apply it to. I'd assume it's going to be orders. Does it say?
Yeah, the Kubernetes service name is orders. Yeah.
Okay, so it'd be orders dot. It doesn't say what namespace, so I'm going to assume the default namespace. So it'd be orders dot svc dot default. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Default dot svc dot plug. Yeah, that's fine. I was more hinting at line 79.
Oh yeah. That's a good call out there.
Yeah, so that's what I was hinting at. It's the make sure that the host is set correctly, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's an interesting one too, because if you're using examples and you're not writing this from scratch, there's a possibility that you might mess that up and miss that, and it might not apply, even though the configuration looks correct, or it could be correct, or I don't know if it is.
I mean, yeah, depending. Well, not the whole. If you mess up the host, it's wrong, right? The configuration is wrong, even though the bottom part is like 100% can be 100% correct, right?
Exactly.
So just make sure to double check these things if you're copy pasting.
Exactly. And then for the destination rule, we have our subsets defined, matching both labels on the particular order workloads, so we know which one we're trying to get to, and we know that we're going specifically to the orders workload. And then for 2C, we have to create a delay-based virtual service. So my indentation might be completely off, but the idea is if we have a request going to the prefix /delay to this host, we're going to add a 5-second fixed delay for all the requests coming in. And then for any request going to the fault prefix, we're going to, I guess this might be a way to do it, but using a fault abort and throw in the 403 status code as a return message. So that should satisfy the VS4. I don't know why I'm using ratings, so I'm going to call this back in. So even though that it's...
the naming shouldn't matter, I would think, but if it's explicitly called out, call the resource or save the resource. Do it, but otherwise shouldn't matter.
And then 3A, so that's the next one. We're going to create a strict mTLS policy looking for workloads in the default namespace with the label mTLS strict. And then we want to disable mTLS for port 9000. So if we go here, we just gave it a very generic name. It's in the default namespace, this resource right here. we're matching workloads within the default namespace with the label mTLS strict. We've set the mTLS mode to strict, and then at the port level, any request coming in port 9000 will disable mTLS. So that should address that question.
Yeah.
Comment?
One tip you had for the previous question, if you scroll back up, right? The tip or the question is, how many routes do you have written under your HTTP field?
Oh, I have one route here, and I have another route there.
Or let me rephrase.
Am I missing a route?
I've tried to rephrase it so I don't give it right away. But how many top level elements does the HTTP field have?
I'll leave this one for now.
Okay.
I'll take the hit on this one. I feel like it's a big question, but I feel like it's mostly there and something is missing, but that's okay. All right. I've got the mTLS and peer authentication figured out, and then I need an authorization policy for the next one. So it says write an auth policy that basically applies to workloads with the label app customers in the default namespace. The policy allows access either from a principal called cluster.local with the backend payments or orders. And the only thing I can do with either one of those principles is the get operation against the API path. So I think this is, I'm basically matching for workloads with the app equals customers in the default namespace. And from these particular workloads, I can run my get operation towards the API path. So that seems to satisfy that requirement. And then I need a default denial. This is pretty much it in the payments namespace. So anything in the payments namespace won't be able to talk to anything else. So I think that's it. I'm done. I know
that's it, but there's multiple choice questions.
Okay, all right.
Well, we have 3 of them, so we can just go quickly.
Let's go through the multiple choice.
Yeah, I'll send the link. I did the ticker there. Let me wait. I lost the link now. Oh, there it is. I'll copy it in the comments if people want to help Marino.
Let's go. bit.ly. Istio exam MCQ. Oh gosh. All right, here we go. You want to enable mutual TLS across all workloads in your mesh. How would you do that? Use a mesh TLS. You don't have to do anything. I would go with that. All right, let's see. Is that the first question?
Yeah, that was the first one. Do we want to talk about it or?
Yeah, let's actually. I've been talking and thinking too much. How about you go through it and you tell me if I selected that correctly or not?
It's incorrect.
Oh dang! Wow.
Yeah, might have been. Now that I read it again, I maybe I should apologize beforehand for not maybe wording the questions like very, very correctly. But theoretically, yes, to control mutual TLS settings, you would use a peer authentication resource, right?
Yeah.
However, to enable, you don't have to do anything because it's enabled by default, right? So maybe it's now everyone knows, right? Now everyone's clicking there. But maybe it was a tricky question a little.
I'm not changing my response. I mean, it's just it's a tricky question because you know what, and this is interesting because on the exam you have to sit there and think like there's key words here. Enable versus configure are the key. It's the key word there, right? So I love that. Okay.
Yeah. All right. I have 2 more, so let's do the next one.
All right. What does a workload entry represent? A single instance of any workload inside the cluster. A workload entry is just another name for Kubernetes pod, in cluster, and outside of the cluster workloads, e.g. VMs sharing the same properties. Okay. I would go with a single instance of a VM workload. That is my
Final answer.
final answer, right? But my justification is that, okay, so when you're actually onboarding a VM into the mesh, you actually have to define a workload entry group, but not a workload entry, because you could actually do an automatic registration of the workload itself, provided that you followed all the other guidelines for onboarding that VM. But the thing is, it's also dependent on you deploying the sidecar to the VM itself and it connecting back to Istio. So in the case of what the workload entry is supposed to represent, is actually supposed to represent a VM workload. However, it can also represent a bare metal workload too. Like if I decided I wanted to take a Raspberry Pi or one of those NUCs that are behind me and just run Ubuntu on it and then deploy the sidecar too, I can absolutely do that and then tie that back to Istio as well. So
yeah, that's the correct answer here, right? Single instance of any workload inside the cluster is not, that's not it. Workload entry is not a name for Kubernetes pod. However, conceptually, you can think of it as that
similar entity.
Yeah, and the second one, in cluster and outside of cluster workloads sharing the same properties. This is the sharing the same properties portion is typically associated with the workload group, right? Where you would hear that. All right, let's go two more. Let's go next one.
All right, which of the following statements is considered a best practice when working with virtual service? Dang it. I was literally looking at best practices earlier, and I'm like, this is not going to come up on the exam. We don't care about best practices anyways, we should now. So always create a destination rule for each virtual service. You don't necessarily need one, but I don't know. Hold on. Let's see. Each Kubernetes service should have its own virtual service with a default route. You must always specify a wait in your virtual. Okay, that's not true. I mean, that's not considered a mandatory best practice or a necessary best practice. Always create a virtual service config in the Istio config namespace. I didn't even know there was such a namespace. I thought it was Istio system. But
that's by the way, that's the Istio configuration namespace is by default Istio system, but it could be something else, right?
Yeah. Okay. Istio. Okay. I would say this is a tricky one, man. Oh my gosh.
Which one are like obviously not the right answer?
Okay, so I feel like the fourth one is obviously not correct. The third one is also not correct. The second one, I see. Here's the thing, right? When you think about every Kubernetes service, are you truly exposing every Kubernetes service that is supposed to be inside of the mesh? Like, I mean, technically you could have services that are not in the mesh, right? And you could have services that are in the mesh. And so the services that are in the mesh probably maybe would be appropriate to have, a VS for each one, but that's why that statement technically isn't true, because you would imply that everything deserves a virtual service config. I'm going to go with A, or answer A. Let's see if I'm right.
Yeah. So now so the way that you like rationalize it might have been me writing the correct answer in a wrong way.
Oh, dang. Okay.
Yeah. So you always want your virtual service to have a default route.
Right. Yeah. That's
right. Fair. So nothing.
Yeah. But the thing is, yeah. So if I think it's just the way the answer was worded.
My fault. I know. It's the wording might have been different, but yeah, the idea is you always should have a default route in the virtual service set for the services that are part of your mesh. That if I had that, then maybe that would. But yeah, the destination rule for each service. I don't know.
I don't think
that's. I mean, you don't have to have it, right? You could if you want to. The only thing to remember with destination rules and virtual services, just in general, is especially when you're doing traffic splitting or adding new versions to. I think there's a specific order in which you should go and create the resources in, right? Because you don't want to create a virtual service with some subsets and then apply it if you don't have subsets defined, right? But anyway, that might have been all right. Last one, and this is the last one. I actually have another one, but I don't. Yeah. For some reason, we're using the reusing. There you go. Let's do this. Okay. This looks better.
What is the purpose of the export to field? To make workloads accessible from another namespace is my answer. And this is just, I remember this from it being the ability to kind of control RBAC and the way you control various resources as well in the cluster, and limit their ability to like just do east-west communications. I am definitely going with this answer. Am I wrong? Am I wrong again? Damn it.
Now I'm not sure anymore. Let me take a look. Yeah, so it's wrong. That's
oh my
wrong.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, now that the way let me figure it out.
To control which namespace the virtual service applies to.
Yeah, there's so well. Let's look at the yeah. So export to a list of namespaces to which this virtual service is exported.
Okay.
So exporting a virtual service allows it to be used by sidecars and gateways defined in other namespaces. So this feature provides a mechanism for service owners and mesh admins to control the visibility of virtual services across namespace boundaries. So it's not necessarily accessibility. Yeah. It's not workload. Yeah, there you go.
So I'm curious who EWOXB is. I'm actually like, I have no idea who that is, but I feel like I know them somehow in person. Anyways, thanks for coming along and tagging along. All right. So I think we're done, right? Did I pass this exam or did I?
Yeah, I mean, the last sections. Yeah, sure. I guess. Yeah. Let's say you pass. I don't know. We haven't actually applied the resources yet, but
to validate.
To validate the thing. But I mean, if people are interested, let us know. We can do the second part, right, where we actually go and have Marino apply. That one would be a short one, probably.
Yeah.
A 30-minute stream where we just go through and see what Marino came up with and fix the things that he did wrong, because he did some things wrong, at least 2 or 3, if I remember that list. But yeah, I think it's a pass. EWOX definitely gets a pass, I think.
Yes.
They
excellent
did
EWOX.
very well. But
was EWOX also like pasting into the survey and going along too?
Probably. I don't know. I can't see. We're not tracking anyone. I don't think anyone provided their emails, but
okay. All right. Yeah. So let me stop talking. Maybe Alessandro, why don't you share some of your perspectives of how this went?
So no, it's very interesting. So I was actually collecting, and I'm trying to collect, and I have a kind cluster. I was applying the Istio operator. It works just fine. So I lost you a bit in the second part, and then I was I'm making a branch in our repository. So I was checking actually your answers and combining them with mine. I would say Istio is difficult. This is gonna be a difficult exam for everyone, even the experts. So I'm definitely interested. So the last one actually interesting because we didn't touch service entry, and export to is a field in service entry, right? So,
as well as in virtual service.
As well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was export to in the context of virtual service.
I think it means the same. It means the same thing regardless if it's service entry or if it's virtual service.
I mean, I'll think about it in the context of service entry to export a service entry to in the context of service discovery in Istio, right? So, but maybe
Yeah, but it applies to both. It applies
virtual
to
service.
yeah as well. Yeah.
Okay. Today I learned that yeah,
Yeah.
export can be applied to service and to restrict the namespaces that that virtual service is known to.
Exported, visible to yeah.
And so that reduce a lot the amount of information that is sent to the envoy proxies in a specific namespace.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think I think Marino did well. I think you did well. It's it was probably less stress than the actual exam, right? But I think you did well. It's a lot of, I think time management is one thing that people have to be very cognizant about, because you can lose like 30 minutes easily on a single question if you want to, right?
Yeah, and I also want to just add to the fact that as you're going through like the exam itself, that time management becomes extremely critical because you need the time at the end to go back and check the things that, like, for example, I misnaming or renaming that host, right? And that could have gone a completely different direction where I could have failed that question altogether. It's definitely 2 hours of an exam, so you have more time than what we're going through right now. I think I did it in like 75 minutes, and I'm sure the exam itself probably has an additional couple more questions and has some more more details in some of the questions as well, requiring that extra time as well. So
the main suggestion is like just directly go to the Istio documentation and copy paste the examples there. I mean, the first thing, I don't know if you probably in the exams environment also as a editor, otherwise gets killed with VI, of course. But I believe that is an editor, so just start copy pasting the examples from the Istio docs.
Yeah.
And edit those, right? So you can't go wrong. And then indeed, like well, in the beginning you show on these two docs there's the API documentation, right? So every object is explained, and you see many specs are common among objects, like a component spec and these resources spec. So you have to learn how to navigate those API. It's kind of like the Kubernetes API docs, which is like the Bible of Kubernetes objects. The same thing. You get this Bible of APIs, which is describing everything you can do with every object in Istio, all these CRDs and what you can do, and then you have to learn how to navigate and see where you can, what kind of, for example, these labels is not an array. The labels in destination rule, the multiple labels, is a map. So
yes.
you have
to So one thing is like when it's a map, there's no dashes, right?
Yeah.
When it's array, you have to have like dash represents a single element in an array, and then goes back to this. I know I made that visible before, but extra false routeless items under HTTP still hurt me.
And this can take you some time, right? So figuring out how to write a mesh, how to write a map. There are different ways of expressing the same thing, like a number of labels and their values. But
if you're not sure, instead of, I would say, if you're not sure about something, like should I do like an array? Is it a map? Is it a value? Is it a number? Whatever it is, always go to like references, right? References section in the documentation. I would rather do that than going through the tasks and trying to find a 100% right answer, because I think they're not going to be 100% correct answer in there, but you're better off looking at the reference docs, unless you know exactly where the specific thing is. So the other note that I think we talked about it. Be mindful of time, right? That was one. And then the second one was that I wrote down was do a first pass of all questions, which Marino did, right? And I think that's important because you know what's what's coming up, and you can kind of prioritize if you want to do like the easy stuff that you feel it's easier to you. Do that first, and then leave the hard stuff at the end. I think that makes sense. If you want to strategize even more, maybe look at the weight of the questions and how much those questions add to the total score. But that feels like, I don't know, almost like gaming the system in a way. I don't know. Pick what's easiest, go through it first, or things that are you 100% sure, and then do the others afterwards, or if you have time left.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, normally I wouldn't have approached it the way I did, like where I started right at the beginning and kind of flowed towards the end, and where at the last, section I kind of did the reverse. Again, go with the easiest questions first. Like try to knock them out because they're probably like the low-hanging fruit that if you can get them done in 1 or 2 minutes, you have all that extra time for some of the larger, longer questions. Like the authorization one took me a lot longer than I normally would have thought because it's just extra stuff. And then the one with the HTTP routing to different hosts with or different services with the delays and the faults, like that one itself, it's okay. You're not only battling with having to get all the right pieces in, you're also having to make sure your indentation's right, because guess what? You want to be stuck right at the end. You don't want to be stuck right at the end, pasting your YAML in, and all of a sudden the terminal keeps telling you it can't parse parse like line 79 or something. And then you can't even figure out where line 79 is because you're sitting there counting each one. So no, I mean, maximize your efficiency by doing the easy stuff up first and then tackle the harder ones in increasing order. You're basically looking at it from playing a video game. You basically go through all these levels and you save that difficult boss to the very end, right? Because you're building up to it and you're actually going to build up a lot of momentum and steam before you actually run out of that energy. So you'll be fine.
Yeah. And also like double check everything in terms of you don't want to lose points or not get all the points because you left the reviews in instead of payments host or whatever it is, right? And those are like stupid mistakes that everyone makes, right? It's like a typo, but it's not worth losing points over that. Just make sure you go through it, read it again, make sure the names match right between what you have in the resource and what's in the question. Any final words? No, all good.
Oh yeah, I thought you were asking the audience, but for me, all I've got to say is it takes a lot of time to prep. I didn't actually prep much for this in the way of like having their testing things out. All I was really doing this morning was literally bookmarking a whole bunch of documents that I thought or doc sites that I might use, and I maybe use like 10% of it. But the subtle exercise is familiarizing yourself with the different stuff that's out there in the docs. Right? Maybe you don't use it today. You might use it somewhere in the future. But that like one little line, you read the title, and it becomes a trigger for you inside of your exam or some other situation. Yeah. So that's part of the reason I did that as well. But the search function is pretty good too.
Yes, yeah, and just keep in mind you won't be able to like bring your bookmarks over or bring your shortcuts or bring your keys, or I don't think you can do that.
I thought you can you bring your bookmarks over for these CNCF exams, because I remember doing that for the CKA and CCAD.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Unless they give you a browser that is just like completely blank, and if that's the case, then I can understand that. But
it's your browser. I mean, it's
so you should have access to your bookmarks as well, as long as they're all the specific istio.io website and nothing else.
Oh, really? I wasn't aware of that. But
if your bookmark goes to a website that is not allowed, it's
okay. Now I get it. I mean, you're going to be sharing your screen with them anyway. So
Istio Docs is easy to navigate.
Yeah. I just wasn't sure if the environment is like if you have a browser within that environment. You know what I mean? And you can only use that browser within that environment, which means you can't use the right. But anyway, I don't think personally. I don't think you will even need the bookmarks, right? As long as you know
the docs,
Istio.io and you know how to
Yeah.
navigate the docs, you should be fine.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Any more questions, comments from the audience while we're still here? Yeah, thanks to everyone who was following along and listening in. If this was useful, let us know. If it wasn't, let us know as well. We'll probably do another session where we go through and see like if Marino passed or not. And I'll issue him a certificate or something. I don't know. But then, yeah, let us know if we should do something similar as well. Like I was thinking, maybe do these multiple choice questions are more interesting because there's a lot of audience participation, right?
Yeah.
But we could do something like that where we have like a more elaborate multiple choice questions thing, and people can actually sign in and maybe get points and do things like that. Did someone take this exam before in this forum? So this is a new exam. No one took it before. Just to be 100% transparent, I did work on the first Istio exam certification that was released. I never took it, but I was working on it. It's a new exam. I don't think anyone took this specific CNCF exam before. So it's a lot of guessing from our part on what could be on the exam and what we got from the curriculum document.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, honestly, Peter made up these questions today or over the last couple of days, I imagine, or a week, and I had no idea what to expect. I mean, aside from knowing what's on the blueprint. And so it absolutely helps having enough practice working with Istio, not in the sense of full-time production all the time, but that you spent probably about a year or two playing with it, understanding some of the inner workings, and you're very familiar with Kubernetes. For me to do what I was able to do in this last hour and a half, I wouldn't have been able to do 2 years ago. It's impossible, right? So it takes time to like really, really learn and figure out how all of this stuff works and is pieced together. It's not just going in there, dropping a bunch of commands and then walking out. You have to know the logic behind how like the gateway uses an actual pod resource for that transaction behind the scenes. But we're creating abstractions on top of that for every one of our services that we create or whatever we need to expose. And then we have like all this linkage of all these other resources too. So that logic is important to be aware of before you jump into this exam. But that's all I've got.
Yeah. All right. Well, awesome. Thanks everyone. And we'll be back, I guess, I would say after KubeCon, right?
Yep. I hope to see you at KubeCon too.
Yeah. If anyone's coming to KubeCon, to Chicago, I think all of us will be there, right?
Yeah.
Alessandro, you're joining us as well, right?
Yeah. And rejects on the weekend before. So
that's the weekend. Yeah. So find us at KubeCon. Don't be shy. Please extend the series with ambient mesh too. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. If we would do an ambient mesh, even though ambient mesh is not on the exam, right? Yet. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening in. Thanks, Marino, for suffering, and we'll see you all in Chicago or here after Chicago. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.